10 years ago today, I was in the same predicament with her brother.
It's very heartbreaking to go on knowing you have 6 kids and left with 4 within 2 weeks grace period of time. It's very hard, but I'm trying to stay strong for my other kids.
This is the haunting atmosphere inside the funeral of 6-year-old Alena Monica Ross and her brother, 14-year-old Braylon Ryder. 2 small caskets placed side by side, a grieving mother surrounded by her remaining surviving children, and a community overwhelmed by sorrow. Just moments earlier, she had been at the funeral home preparing to bury her 14-year-old son, only to return home to discover her 6-year-old daughter was gone. But what investigators uncovered after these tragedies revealed something far more unsettling than coincidence.
Words can't describe, but I just want justice for it. I want justice, I want answers.
And this is the heartbreaking plea from a family member of 9-year-old Trinity Love Jones, a little girl whose life ended inside the very hands that was supposed to be her safe place. But what investigators uncovered would reveal something far more disturbing than a single act of violence. How could the people closest to these children fail to protect them when they were the ones who were supposed to keep her safe? On March 5, 2019, at around 10 in the morning, a Los Angeles County Parks and Recreation worker was clearing the bush trail adjacent to 3400 block South Hacienda Boulevard in Hacienda Heights when he noticed something unusual. There was a large black rolling duffel bag sitting alone near the path. At first, it looked like someone had simply forgotten their belongings, which wasn't unusual since Pico Rivera Sports Arena was nearby and riders sometimes do that. But something about it felt wrong. When he looked closer to the bag, it looked heavy and stiff, and it looked like something was protruding from inside. It did not look like it belonged there. Instead of opening it, the man made the decision that would uncover a tragedy. He called the police. When Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies arrived and opened the bag, they discovered the body of a young child. She was wrapped in clothing. She didn't have any shoes on but was wearing a black and white pants and a pink with the inscription, "Future Princess Hero." By looking at her, investigators predicted she could be between the ages of 8 and 13 years old. But at that moment, investigators did not know her name or where she had come from. They only knew someone had left the child alone in the middle of nowhere. As they continued searching for clues on the crime scene, they found vehicle tire marks on the trail. Whoever had dropped the duffel bag had driven there. And since no one saw any unusual activity there during the day, it likely happened when it was dark. Investigators photographed the tire impressions, measured the distance between them, and began narrowing down the type of vehicle that could have left them. Every detail mattered. The duffel bag itself was examined for fibers, fingerprints, and DNA. The surrounding brush was searched for discarded items, footprints, or signs of struggle. A press conference was organized where Lieutenant Scott Hogan, with the Sheriff Homicide Bureau, addressed the media as he shared the information about the case. A composite sketch of the victim was also displayed. Lieutenant Scott also called for the public's help in identifying the young child. However, investigators were suspicious about one thing. Nobody had recently reported a child missing, and other alerts they had did not match who they had found. Why hasn't anyone reported her missing? There had been no desperate phone call to the police or even a search party. In cases like this, the first thing investigators do is get the body to a coroner to try and get the identity of the person. So on March 9th, the identification process started. Fingerprints and DNA samples were collected for testing. When the result came back, it was as heartbreaking as seeing her in the duffel bag. There was physical trauma on her, some were recent, others showed signs of healing, meaning this was not something that happened only once. Meanwhile, as detectives are trying to piece together information of this little girl they found, across the city in Los Angeles, a child had not been seen for days. This was 9-year-old Trinity Love Jones. Trinity Love Jones lived with her mother, 31-year-old Tequesta Graham, and her boyfriend, 42-year-old Emil Lamar Hunt. Emil was originally from Texas before he had moved to Los Angeles. Friends and family say Emil was a quiet man. He didn't say much, but he was strict. Trinity was described as a shy, quiet, soft-spoken girl who loved to dance. She enjoyed her own company at home and in school. She could sometimes be withdrawn, but it was not something people around her really worried about. However, by the ending of February 2019, subtle but troubling changes began to surface in Trinity's behavior. Teachers who once described her as lively noticed she had grown more quiet, withdrawn, and reluctant to engage with classmates. The spark that had defined her presence in the classroom seemed to dim, and those closest to her sensed something was wrong. But this was only the beginning. Soon, Trinity stopped coming to school altogether. When staff reached out to her mother, Tequesta Graham, the responses were vague and repetitive. "She's sick," or "she's just staying at home." The excuses continued. What makes this part of the case even harder to understand is the absence of a wellness check or follow-up visits from the school. Here was a pupil who had been missing classes for an extended period, with no clear medical documentation, no explanation beyond a parent's word, and no visible effort to verify her safety. In hindsight, this gap in oversight feels chilling. A child was slipping away from the system, and nobody thought it wise to knock on her door, to ask the difficult questions, or to ensure she was truly okay. Meanwhile, by the 7th of March, the police could now attach a name to the victim. They publicly confirmed that the person they had found in the abandoned duffel bag was 9-year-old Trinity Love Jones. The coroner's report also painted a heartbreaking picture of what little Trinity had endured. They determined the child had been physically mistreated and denied food. On top of that, she had an infection on her feet so painful it made it hard for her to even wear shoes. Her body told the rest of the story. From head to toe, coroners noted scars, marks that showed the mistreatment hadn't been a single incident, but something that had gone on for a long time. As you can predict, the story has now shifted, because this was no more someone the authorities could not identify. She has a home, with people who are supposed to be protecting her, but the big question was, how come no one had reported this child missing? The last time anyone had seen Trinity alive was on March 1st, 2019, 4 days before the duffel bag was discovered. So 4 days of a 9-year-old not being seen by her parents or guardian, not attending school, and no one had called the police. After the public was cleared from the press conference, detectives were met with a new development. Family members of Trinity Love Jones came forward to claim her. Her father, Antonio Jones, stepped forward and shared a heartbreaking truth. He claimed he hadn't seen Trinity for over a year. His voice carried both sorrow and anger, as he declared that he wanted justice for his daughter.
The girl that they found was my daughter, my youngest daughter, and we just want answers, want justice. Words can't explain what I'm feeling right now.
How did you learn the news that it was your daughter?
Somebody called me.
So nice, and she really loved Monster High. Like, she was showing me all her dolls and how much she loved them and stuff. And I was like, I wanted to get her Monster High for her birthday, and it's gone now.
She was just the best. Just full of character, full of love, full of joy.
Not only had Trinity's life been cut short, but she had been separated from her father long before her death. Now the police knew exactly where to begin their investigation and with whom. They immediately went to the address where Trinity lived with her mother, Tequesta Graham, and her mother's boyfriend, Emil Hunt. But when they got there, they would not find them. They seemed to have never lived there. Meanwhile, across another city, another piece of the puzzle was falling into place. On March 8, 2019, Trinity's mother, Tequesta, and her boyfriend Emil were stopped at a checkpoint in Hudspeth County, Texas. Tequesta had a warrant out for her arrest for a different case. She had a parole violation. At this time, the police who had arrested her did not know the Los Angeles police were looking for both of them. Because of that, they had allowed Emil to go. By the time they realized it would be too late, Tequesta was extradited back to Los Angeles. When she arrived, detectives immediately questioned her about her daughter Trinity. She would give a chilling answer. She said the child was sent to be with a relative out of town. She was calm, almost like she had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her head. She added that Trinity was safe wherever she was. However, detectives knew she was lying. They had Trinity. When they looked closer to see her reaction, there was no visible expression from someone whose child is no more and is being accused of hurting her. Detectives decided to dig deeper. They needed to check in the family's phone records. That step would confirm their suspicions. On March 4th, Tequesta and Emil's phones showed movement to the east, away from Los Angeles. The destination? Hacienda Heights, the same area where Trinity's body would be discovered the following day. The timing matched the window when investigators believed the bag had been dropped. Highway cameras lined up with the route. Not only that, traffic sensors even picked up a vehicle that matched theirs, a dark sedan, late at night, making a short stop before heading back. The alignment of all those details was definitely not a coincidence. At this point, detectives knew Tequesta didn't act alone. Her boyfriend Emiel was involved, and they needed to bring him in for questioning. The following day, on March 9th, Tequesta's boyfriend, Emiel Hunt, was arrested in San Diego, California. Investigators found him sleeping inside his vehicle in a parking space near San Diego Airport. But the most shocking revelation is about to come. 38-year-old Emiel Hunt was not new to the legal system. He had been arrested several times. Emiel had already spent 12 years behind bars for the torture and mistreatment of his 3-year-old son, a crime that began back in 2005. Not just that. In 2016, he was convicted in San Bernardino County for enticing a 16-year-old girl into selling her body for money. Together, these records painted a picture of a man with deeply troubling pasts. And for investigators, those histories weren't just background details. They were part of the larger story of the kind of person Emiel is. But as detectives began trying to reconstruct Trinity's final days, they discovered that the story did not begin with the duffel bag. Investigators learned that Emiel had been living in his car, and this was not unusual. It had become their way of life for Trinity, her mother, and him. Investigators later shared that for the 10 months before Trinity's death, the family had been bouncing between their vehicle and cheap motel rooms. It was a rough existence. They didn't have a stable home, so they relied on places like fitness clubs to meet basic needs. Employees at a particular fitness club shared that Trinity, her mother, and Emiel often came in to shower. It was one of the few ways they could keep up with daily routines while living on the move. These details painted a picture of instability. For nearly a year, Trinity's world was defined by car seats, motel beds, and borrowed facilities. And for investigators, that lifestyle became an important piece of understanding how her situation had spiraled so far out of control. When detectives showed them pictures of Trinity, both knew there was no way out. The evidence was too strong. When detectives questioned Emiel, he was calm. He did not appear nervous or showed visible panic. Instead, he described Trinity as a child who was fragile and accident-prone. He suggested that injuries she may have suffered were the result of normal accidents. But investigators were not looking for explanations based on assumptions. They were looking for a confession, but Tequesta had a different version of events. She told police that weeks before Trinity's death, the little girl had fallen and hit her head. But instead of seeking medical care, Tequesta admitted she didn't take her to a doctor because she was afraid of getting into trouble. She described how Trinity developed a large lump on her forehead. Her eyes began to swell, and her speech became slurred. At one point, Tequesta said Trinity even had a seizure, but instead of rushing her to the hospital, Tequesta went back to work, leaving her daughter to sleep in the back seat of the car. That night, Tequesta noticed something terrifying. Trinity wasn't breathing. She told detectives she wanted to call 911, but her boyfriend Emiel convinced her not to. For investigators, that detail was devastating. It showed that even when Trinity's life was clearly in danger, the adults around her chose silence over action. And that silence became one of the most haunting parts of the case, because Trinity had missed several days from school before her death. There were no clear medical explanations, no obvious reason given for her absence, and no official concern was raised before it was too late. In March 10, 2019, both Tequesta Graham and Emiel Hunt were officially arrested and charged with the murder of 9-year-old Trinity Love Jones. For the next 3 years, the case moved through the courts. Prosecutors built their case around evidence of neglect, mistreatment, and the couple's troubling history. Finally, on April 22, 2022, just as the trial was about to begin, both defendants accepted plea deals rather than face a jury. Tequesta Graham, Trinity's mother, pleaded no contest to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and Emiel Hunt, her boyfriend, pleaded no contest to mistreatment of a child causing death. His role was considered more severe, and he received 25 years to life. The whole community of Hacienda Heights wrapped around the family with vigils and memorials, and on March 26, 2019, Trinity was laid to rest in Hacienda Heights.
Tears were shed as final goodbyes were said at a memorial service for a 9-year-old girl found dead along a hiking trail in Hacienda Heights. The community came together to honor the short life of Trinity Love Jones.
Her mother and her boyfriend are facing charges in connection with the little girl's death. KCAL 9's Joy Benedict is live outside the St. John Vianney Parish, in Hacienda Heights, where the service was held. Joy?
Yeah, Sharon, no matter how many funeral services you attend, especially when you're dealing with children, it certainly doesn't get any easier for anyone who comes and shows up. And come is what they did today as the community really rallied together. It was 90 seconds of bells for 9 years of life. As a community said goodbye to Trinity Love Jones.
Today, Trinity comes down from heaven and blesses the darkness.
It was an emotional service as family and friends remembered a little girl with an outpouring of love.
A unique, gifted, charismatic, beautiful, life of the party young girl. And as her father described her, someone with so much character.
But what is hard for many here is accepting how she died. Found on the side of the road, stuffed inside a duffel bag, her own mother and mother's boyfriend accused of her murder.
When do we change the channel from this alarming episode of young black girls dying?
Trinity's father was here, as were other members from both sides of her family.
Say a prayer for us, please, because we all need prayer right now in the situation that we're going through.
But most inside this church never met this little girl, and it didn't matter.
When I heard about the story, the first thing came to my mind was like, Lord, I would have took that child in.
Because you didn't have to know Trinity Love Jones to feel her loss.
Now is the time for us as a community to show up for this family and demonstrate a love that says she was our daughter too, and her dying shall not be in vain.
For in every story told about this little girl who loved to dance and play dress up, and in every photo of her smiling face, the world sees not only Trinity, but every little girl lost who simply deserved better. Certainly a very sad day for so many. Now, as for Trinity's mother and her mother's boyfriend, they are both being held on $2 million each. They are both charged with.
As devastating as Trinity's story is, the hardest part to accept is the consequences of failing to protect a child when the warning signs are already there. And before the pain from her case had even faded, another family would find themselves facing a heartbreaking reality. Sometimes, a single moment of carelessness can change a family forever. On January 10, 2024, officers from the Dallas Police Department rushed to a home after they received a terrifying emergency call about a child not breathing. When they arrived at the home, inside was a 6-year-old girl, Alena Ross, a little girl whose life would end in a moment that no one inside the family could have imagined. Alena was found suffering from a gunshot wound. They immediately started trying to give her first aid, desperately trying to keep her alive before eventually rushing her to the hospital. The doctors did all they could, but it was already too late. She passed away a few hours after arriving. But what made this tragedy even harder to understand was that Alena's death came while her family was already preparing to bury another child. Just days earlier, on December 29, 2023, at around 5 in the evening, Alena's 14-year-old brother, Braylon Ryder, and another teen were shot by a 16-year-old. He would sadly pass 2 days later, on New Year's Eve. The small everyday details are the ones that hit the hardest. And when their mother, Brittany Ross, talked about that last evening, she remembered that Braylon had gone over to a friend's house on Harry Hines Boulevard in Oak Lawn, never once thinking that would be the last time she would see him. What was more heartbreaking was while Brittany spoke about her son's heartbreaking death, 6-year-old Alena had been standing right beside her mother, No one could have imagined that just days later she would be gone too. His family was still grieving the loss of a teenager who should have been preparing for a new year, making memories, and growing into the future ahead of him. Instead, they were planning his funeral. Then another phone call changed everything.
As soon as I answered the FaceTime, my 11-year-old daughter, she screamed through the phone, "Mama, Alena shot herself in the head."
2 children, 2 tragedies, 2 funerals, all within 2 weeks. For their family, no chance to process one loss before another devastating call came. Detectives quickly began piecing together what had unfolded that night. The home was filled with friends and family visiting, among them Demaria Sowles, a 19-year-old whose presence would soon become central to the investigation. According to investigators, Demaria had brought 2 firearms into the house that day, a MAC-10 and a Glock 40. What he did next was deeply unsettling. He left the MAC-10 unsecured, resting casually on top of a PlayStation console in Abralin's bedroom. It was a reckless decision, one that ignored the fact that children were present in the home. At some point, the weapon discharged. The sound of the shot shattered the evening, and in an instant, the bullet struck Alena Modica Ross. She collapsed immediately. The room that had moments earlier been filled with chatter and family warmth was now consumed by panic and horror. Relatives screamed, rushing to her side, while others froze in disbelief. In a matter of seconds, a normal day turned into a nightmare. A 6-year-old child was suddenly fighting for her life because of an avoidable mistake, and everyone inside that home was left trying to understand how it happened. But investigators say the tragedy became even more complicated because of what happened next. Instead of immediately calling for emergency help, Demaria panicked. According to police, he moved the firearms and hid them inside a backpack in the garage before officers arrived. Officers would later find them, and Demaria was arrested for tampering with evidence. He also had other outstanding warrants, including 2 for evading arrest, detention, and 1 for unlawful carrying of a weapon. When detectives recovered the weapons, they believed Demaria had attempted to conceal evidence connected to the shooting. The tragedy was compounded by timing. At the very moment Alena was shot, her mother, Brittany Ross, was at a mortuary planning the funeral for her son Braylon. One child lost to teenage violence, another lost to an unsecured gun. The family's grief was unimaginable. Alena's grandfather, Michael Key, also expressed his heartbreak to reporters.
We live in a nightmare right now, and it's hurting me real bad.
Michael also expressed his anger over why anyone would have an unsecured gun in the home where children were present.
And that's what I'm so upset about right now. If there was a gun in this house, this gun should have been put up in a safe location where she couldn't have reached it or got hold to it. So I'm very upset about that. And I'm just hurt.
The family eventually made the heartbreaking decision to postpone Braylon's funeral so that both siblings could be laid to rest together. Meanwhile, Brittany Ross faced the heartbreaking reality. She told reporters she was overwhelmed, struggling to process the loss of 2 children in less than 2 weeks.
Tomorrow, a mother will bury 2 of her children, one 14 years old, the other 6.
Last week, 6-year-old Alena Ross was shot and killed at an East Dallas townhome. The girl's mother was already making funeral preparations for her teenage son, who was also shot and killed. Fox 4's Amelia Jones spoke with the grieving mother and joins us now from Dallas. Amelia.
Heather, Dallas police still haven't said how they believe a 6-year-old Alena Ross was shot. The girl's mother told me today she's frustrated with the lack of answers.
I love pictures and videos, and you know, that was something that I love because memories is everything.
Memories are all that Brittany Ross has left of her daughter and son. The 2 were killed in separate shootings almost 2 weeks apart.
My kids did not deserve that at all.
On December 29th, Ross says her son, 14-year-old Braylon Ryder, went over to a friend's house on Harry Hines Boulevard in Oaklawn. Dallas police say a 16-year-old boy shot Ryder and another 14-year-old.
The boy came in the range, and I'm sure Braylon probably tried to stand up, and you shot him in his head with no hesitation.
Ryder died, and the other boy survived. The 16-year-old was arrested and charged with manslaughter. 12 days later, on January 10th, Ross was at the funeral home planning her son's services when she got a call from one of her other kids.
As soon as I answered the FaceTime, My 11-year-old daughter, she screamed through the phone, "Mama, Alena shot herself in the head."
Dallas police have not confirmed how 6-year-old Alena Ross was shot. They say when officers got to the townhome on North Fitzhugh Avenue, they found an unsecured handgun. Questioned 19-year-old Demaria Sowles as a witness to the shooting. According to police documents, Sowles admitted to placing a handgun on top of the PlayStation in the bedroom on the 3rd floor. After the shooting, investigators say he took the gun, put it in a backpack along with a second gun, and hid it in the garage of the home. Ross says Sowles is friends with her 18-year-old son. Her other kids, an 8-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter, were also in the house when the shooting happened.
It's very heartbreaking to go on knowing you have 6 kids and left with 4 within 2 weeks grace period of time. It's very hard, but I'm trying to stay strong for my other kids.
Sowles was arrested and charged with tampering with evidence. Ross wants to know the truth about what happened that day.
Because I need answers. I need answers.
A mother's strength to fight for her children.
It gives me chills down my spine thinking about it.
And keep their memory alive.
I'm not giving up. I won't give up.
The funeral for Braylon and Alena will be held tomorrow. Sowles is still being held at the Dallas County Jail. In addition to tampering with evidence, he also has several outstanding warrants, including 2 for evading arrest, detention, and 1 for unlawful carry of a weapon. Right now, there are no charges in connection to Alena's death.
She still had 4 surviving children to care for, but the weight of grief was crushing. But for detectives, the question was bigger than grief. How could one family lose 2 children in 2 separate shootings within days? Demaria Sowles admitted bringing the weapons into the home where Alena was killed. He admitted hiding them after the shooting. Prosecutors emphasized that his choices, bringing guns into a house with children, leaving them unattended, directly led to her death. Demaria claimed he hadn't meant for the gun to be left unattended. Others insisted he should never have brought weapons into the home. Prosecutors argued that his actions showed disregard for safety and human life. As of the post of this case, no update had been made in the court proceedings. Prosecutors are still reviewing whether additional charges, such as negligent homicide, will be filed. Proceedings have been slow, with hearings postponed multiple times. No sentencing has been announced. The community rallied around Brittany, organizing vigils for the 2 children. Several community members lit candles to honor them. But the court wasn't the only place where questions were being asked. Across Dallas, parents wondered, how many more children were living in homes where guns were left unsecured? The answer was chilling. Statistics showed that accidental shootings involving children were rising nationwide. Alena's case was not an isolated tragedy. It was part of a larger epidemic. Alena Monica Ross's death became more than a criminal case. It became a symbol of the urgent need for gun safety and child protection. Neighbors came together to organize fundraisers to help cover funeral expenses. A GoFundMe campaign supported Brittany Ross, who still had 4 surviving children to care for. Because in communities like this, the pain of one family is the pain of the whole community. The funeral for Braylon Ryder and his younger sister, Alena Monica Ross, was described as both heartbreaking and beautiful. Family, friends, and community members gathered to honor the 2 children who were taken far too soon. The service was filled with emotion. Loved ones spoke about Braylon's bright personality, his love for sports, and the way he looked out for his siblings. They remembered Alena's laughter, her playful spirit, and the innocence that made her loss so devastating. The siblings were laid to rest side by side, a decision made by their mother, Brittany Ross, who wanted them to remain together even in death. One child was lost to teenage gun violence. Another was lost because a firearm was allegedly left unsecured inside a home. 2 children who had shared the same family, the same home, and the same love were now being mourned side by side. 2 little girls, 2 different stories, 2 families left with grief that words can barely hold. Trinity Love Jones, her absence overlooked until she was found in a duffel bag on a lonely trail, in the worst possible state a child should never endure. And Alena Monica Ross, her laughter silenced by a inside her own home, while her family was already preparing to bury her brother. Their names remind us that tragedy isn't always sudden. Sometimes it builds quietly, through missed signs, ignored absences, and reckless choices by those who should be their protectors. And as we reflect on their stories, I have one question to ask you. What does justice look like when the lives we're fighting for are already gone? Let me know what you think in the comments, and may Trinity Love Jones and Alena Ross' souls finally rest easy. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.